Welcome to the 2021 Western Region virtual event. For the first time ever, museum supporters from the 10 Western states are coming together as a region in support of the museum.
We may not be together physically, but at a time when we're needed more than ever to support the museum's mission, we are coming together across time zones, diverse cities and states to celebrate our collective commitment to the work and the mission of the museum.
The museum is very important to me. It has to show the world what happened.
It is a living memorial to all who suffered and died.
With the rise of antisemitism and the rise of Holocaust deniers, we must never forget.
We need the museum now more than ever.
It reminds us of how fragile democracy is.
The genocide prevention work of the museum is critical.
The museum matters to make sure that we protect society and humanity with compassion and education.
Is really the cornerstone in the U.S. Capitol, on the Mall, as such a beacon of hope for the future and a different future for our children without rage and anger and intolerance and genocide and hatred for each other. It's a place where we can come together and learn how we can work and live together as a human race.
My name is Eric Levine, and this is my wife, Susie, from Seattle, Washington. We're delighted to represent the Western Region Leadership Committee for this special event and to welcome you all. Thank you, and enjoy the program.
Good evening. I'm Marla Abraham, the museum's Western Region Director. I'd like to begin by simply saying thank you. Thank you to the inspiring leaders across our 10-state region who are deeply committed to our cause, and to all of you for your generous support. Tonight, we will go behind the scenes to look at what your partnership is making possible. We will hear inspiring stories about the power of individuals to make a difference, regardless of circumstances. People like this evening's MC. Disturbingly, many Jewish celebrities face a barrage of anti-Semitic bile on social media. Former Shameless star Emmy Rossum was no exception, but she was not about to let it pass. Emmy called out what she was facing, and in doing so, raised awareness for her over 3.5 million followers about the corrosive consequences to any society when hatred like anti-Semitism is allowed to flourish. Please join me in welcoming this evening's MC, courageous activist, actor, supporter of the museum, the fabulous Emmy Rossum.
Marla, thank you so much. It is a pleasure to join you all. The theme of this program says it all. What we do matters. We are here today to recommit ourselves to this critically important museum and its mission. When you think about the moment we're living through, the enormity of challenges, remembering this history and its lessons about the fragility of freedom, the nature of hate, and the consequences of indifference could not be more relevant. Tonight is about the power of individuals and the preciousness of freedom. The museum's collection shows us how, amidst a reality filled with horror, victims and survivors created poetry, music, and art, and used their imagination to reclaim a fragment of freedom. With these small but remarkable acts of defiance, they refused to surrender their humanity to the brutalities of the Holocaust. Zbigniew Kochanovich wrote during his internment, "The words of this song are stained without blood. Within them are sorrow and grief. Yet your camp song will carry you beyond these barbed wires to a distant place unknown to you." Music lives when it is played, and composers are known when their music is heard. At the Colburn Conservatory of Music in Los Angeles, through its Ziering Conlon Initiative for Recovered Voices, students are introduced to Jewish composers whose works were banned during the 12 years of the Nazi regime. Tonight, they will perform an excerpt from the work of composer Erwin Schulhoff, whose life was cut short in the Wurzburg camp in 1942. Performing the Tarantella movement of his 5 pieces for string quartet, violinists Galia Kastner and Adam Milstein, violist Kara Pagosian, and cellist Ben Solomonow restore one part of the damaged musical legacy of the 20th century that belongs to us all. The resilience of the human spirit and the power of individual choice are core lessons of the Holocaust and survivor Gerda Weissman-Klein's story. Gerda was born in Bielsko, Poland. Her idyllic childhood ended with the onset of war. At 16, she was forced into the ghetto. By 18, she was sent to the first of 4 different labor camps. In the freezing January of 1945, she began the first leg of a terrible death march, which ended hundreds of miles and months later in Volery, Czechoslovakia. She was finally liberated, and the soldier who liberated her, Kurt Klein, who with the simple gesture of opening a door for her, gave her back her humanity, would become her beloved husband. She moved with him to America and there found her greatest gift.
And I came totally to Buffalo, New York. This is where normalcy began. This is where my children were born and played. This is when I learned what freedom is all about. Stop being afraid. Being able to say what you want to say without fear. Do you realize what that means?
In this day and age, we think it's impossible that it could recur. But more than anything, the Holocaust was a failure of imagination. A lifelong activist, Gerda wrote her memoir, All But My Life, to ensure that her story would live on to teach future generations. In it, she remembers one of the powerful acts of kindness from her fellow prisoners, which helped her to survive. Gerda had been severely beaten. For the first time, she felt her strength begin to crumble. She lay on her bunk, hiding her bruised and bloody face, and she writes, Ilsa, who worked the day shift, came back at noon. I brought you a present, she announced triumphantly. There, on a fresh leaf, was one red, slightly mashed raspberry. As I sat up, she stared at my face. The raspberry rolled under the bunk, and I crawled under to get it. I ate it slowly, dust and all, its sweet juice mingled with the saltiness on my lips. Please join me in welcoming Gerda Weissman-Klein.
Abby, thank you. You know, it's crazy. I'm 96 years old. I can't believe that, but I'm still here.
You're still here in part because of friends like Ilsa. Can you tell me, what did the raspberry mean to you?
She carried it against the temptation of eating it at an opening. One slightly bruised, dust-covered raspberry. I want people to understand that, to me, the most important memory of the combined brutality and inhumanity of the Holocaust, that under those circumstances, the finest qualities of humanity, I would say sometimes even sainthood, came forth.
In the testimony film from the museum's permanent exhibit, you say that one of the greatest lessons of the Holocaust was to never give up. So what internal resources did you call upon so that you never gave up?
Freedom and imagination go hand in hand. For me, it was always that, I've been blessed with a lot of imagination, which often my husband thought was a little crazy. My children will tell you that. But I was able, in the darkest hours, I was able to imagine incredible things. I will tell you one thing. I remember 2 days that we got nothing to eat, and I remember the horrible feeling of this type of hunger that nobody should experience. And I was so busy trying to formulate a party that I will have after the war. And my biggest worry was, will I have a red dress or a blue dress? I liked the color blue better, but I knew red looked better on me because I had very dark hair. So I was terribly, terribly important to put me that on. But I think if you can have this sort of thing, it can help you survive a lot of things. There was one moment that I would like to share with you, and this is what the mind can conjure, and the death march. I was on this infamous death march with 2,000 girls who started, and less than 120 survived. And if you couldn't go on anymore, and if you sat down, they shot you, they killed everybody. I remember there was a moment, and I remember it was at night, that I felt I just couldn't go on anymore. And at that moment, I knew that if I make it to the next stop, my brother will be there. I had not seen my beloved brother in 5 years. But I knew he would be there. I made it to the next stop. I don't remember what I felt when he wasn't there or whatever it was. It was just something that got me there. Well, I was blessed with a good imagination. And unfortunately, a lot of people were not. If you were facing what you were facing with any honesty, you didn't have a chance.
You've spent so much of your life teaching about your experiences and the lessons of the Holocaust. What role do you think the museum plays in keeping those lessons alive?
The museum stands given testimony by so many people who have experienced the Holocaust and looked at it from all kinds of different sides than mine. It has been visited by literally millions of people from all over the world. The very fact of the existence of the museum, I think its precise location, it stands among the treasures of our democracy, which gives testimony to the fact our beloved country pays tribute to what the museum stands for, to always remember the freedom, which is the most precious gift.
Gerda, you are an incredible inspiration, and I'm so grateful to have had the chance to speak with you today.
So the pleasure is all mine. Thank you.
Last year was the 75th anniversary of liberation. This year marks the 80th anniversary of the beginning of the genocide. Why remember these anniversaries? To remember is to give voice to the 6 million that were silenced. 6 million lives. Lives just like ours. We think of them not as cold statistics or nameless victims, but as fathers and mothers, lovers and friends like Ilsa, and of course, children like ours. Their memories, safeguarded by the museum forever, must be kept alive to help shape a future different from Gerda's past. We remember for them and for us. Let's watch.
Irvin Haber was on a transport from Malines, Belgium to Auschwitz on August 4th, 1942, when he threw 2 letters from the train. Dear Finder, I am a Jewish boy who was caught in Brussels. I am part of a transport of Jewish children who are deported to Poland. We are watched by the Gestapo and not allowed to write, and I am trying to throw this out of the train. I thank you from my heart that you are doing this good deed to my old grandmother and little sister who do not know where I am. Irvin Haber was gassed to death upon his arrival.
Dear family, no fever anymore. Finally, we go. Very weak, but full of courage. My beloved children are next to me. Johanna and her sons were killed shortly after their arrival to Auschwitz.
I highly regret that I could not write to you from Malines, but it was forbidden. Unfortunately, we were denounced on October 20th. We are now on the road to the unknown.
Vilma and Kurt Grunwald and their 2 sons were deported to Auschwitz. Eventually, the oldest son, who was handicapped, was selected for death. In a state of mind that is unimaginable to us, Vilma decided to voluntarily accompany him to the gas chambers so that he would not have to go through that ordeal alone. You, my only and dearest one, do not blame yourself for what happened. It was our destiny. Take care of the little golden boy and don't spoil him too much with your love. Have a fabulous life. We must board the trucks. Into eternity, Vilma.
We would be the fathers, the teachers, educators of the future. But no, we shall certainly not live to see it.
With my own ears, I listened to the terrible symphony of weeping, screaming, and shrieking that engulfed the whole 10,000 people, young and old, grown-ups and babies, ripping heavens to shreds.
We note a proof of guilt which is useless for ourselves. The trace should be thrown like a stone under the wheel of history in order to stop it.
We may now die in peace. We fulfilled our mission. May history attest for us.
In the spring of 1945, American troops in Germany and Austria came upon concentration camps at Buchenwald, Dachau, Nordhausen, Mauthausen, and Ohrdruf. The soldiers saw the camps with their own eyes, and the truth was undeniable. The things I saw beggar description. The visual evidence and verbal testimony of starvation, cruelty, and bestiality were overpowering.
Inside the fence, there were hundreds and hundreds of people crowding. I was 13 years old. I could worm my way through them to get to the front.
We heard a voice telling us, "You are free." It's undescribable, unbelievable. The first minutes, it was magic. It was a miracle. It was a cocktail of happiness.
I think I remember shouting and waving, and then I collapsed unconscious.
These people were scheduled to die, and the preparations were so efficient from the standpoint of disease and starvation. There isn't much that can be done about it.
So hungry. I remember being so hungry. We were so isolated, cold, abandoned by the world.
A little girl, doubled with the gnawing pains of starvation, cried pitifully for help. Everywhere we turned, the pathetic cry of "Wasser, Wasser" met our ears.
So that was the first time I saw American young soldiers feeding us, dressing us. They were wonderful. They were the best people that I can imagine.
Dear Mother, anything you hear about that place, you can believe. It is not propaganda.
It's all the truth, as I saw it with my own eyes.
A sergeant whose mother and father disappeared into a Nazi concentration camp 3 long years ago turned his head and remarked in a tear-choked voice, "And Hitler wanted to rule the world."
To Johanna,
Erwin,
Vilma,
David, and all the others, we will never forget. We pledge to you that we will make your mission ours.
When the museum opened, the Holocaust was living memory. We can't let it become distant history. We built the museum at a particular moment. We planted a flag. We put a powerful, enduring marker here on America's National Mall. The memory is now in our hands, in your hands. The challenge is, what are we going to do with it? Memory was never meant to be contained in this building. It was meant to be unleashed as a force for change. Anti-Semitism and hate didn't start with the Holocaust, nor end with it. They are relentless problems, and we too must be relentless. Because the world always changes, but human nature never does. Right now, we face a perfect storm. Rising hate, growing social media, declining history education. So just when we're giving human beings more power than ever before to influence and be influenced, we're not preparing them for this unprecedented responsibility. That's why history matters, especially Holocaust history. And that's why we're building something new, a global digital enterprise. COVID temporarily closed the museum, but it opened new possibilities. It changed how we work,
Put questions in the chat or raise your hands.
how we built the collection,
We've also had people reach out to us through the online programming.
convened scholars,
A specific connection in the archival material we've looked at on liberation.
and reached policymakers.
The purposes of the legislation, it is to stop violence against the citizenry.
Meeting this challenge has made us better and stronger. And we're serving more people now than ever before. And nowhere has the impact been greater than in the shift to an all-digital educational enterprise.
How would we suggest teachers use the timeline activity for remote instruction when teaching online?
So teachers could assign students to read a specific individual profile card.
The most important audience for the museum in terms of education is youth. So when we had to go from in-person experiences with youth and with educators who reach youth into remote learning environments, we were more than thrilled to be able to rely on what had been built here, what had been invested in here at the museum. We had digital collections, we had digital educational resources, but we had to think about how to make those appropriate and adapt them for these remote learning environments.
Eastern Florida State College would like to express our gratitude.
Just a huge thank you for all of the resources for myself and for the teachers across Tennessee.
Regularly reaching out to me as a faculty member and asking what I needed, what they could do for me.
Lessons and unit plans, Facebook Live sessions.
I took advantage of the Ask a Librarian sessions. I found the Experiencing History portal really very helpful.
The live digital lectures was a great way for us to stay connected.
And I found myself looking for those types of resources to assign to students.
Students with uneven internet connections dispersed across the state could nonetheless continue to access high quality content.
And that for us was really exciting because we knew that that was immediate needs. But we also wanted to think about, is it just for the moment, or can this help us in the long run? For example, in the summer, we would normally bring 250 teachers to the museum to learn about content and pedagogy. When we asked those teachers, would you come if we did it in a virtual format, they said yes.
Today, I welcome you to a very different conference than the one we all envisioned.
Word spread, and before we knew it, we had over 1,000 educators, 4 times as many were able to attend. And when we heard that there were teachers from Bethel, Alaska, Mobile, Alabama, and Paint Lick, Kentucky, we knew that we had achieved something really special.
Educators from all around the world came together to receive quality Holocaust education from the museum.
I don't know what I would do during this time without you.
These were all resources that made a difference in teachers' daily lives. And it also has made a difference in how we move forward as teachers.
One of the earliest transitions that we made with our programs was for the program that invites local youth in DC to become ambassadors for the museum.
Ambassadors, I'm not the only one who has congratulations and well wishes. Our guest speaker served on the museum council, but you may know him better as a 2-time NBA champion, Mr. Ray Allen.
I want to take this moment to say I'm amazed by you all. I'm encouraged. I'm thankful. And each one of you young people has an opportunity to determine what our futures are going to be.
My name is Rose Bohm, and I'm a sophomore at Washington.
My name is Ativa D'Souza, and I'm a rising junior at the Home.
We have all learned so much.
We are the leaders the museum has built.
Makes us want to go out and create an impact on our own personal communities.
We have an obligation to speak out and stand up against hate and bigotry in this world.
As we go forward, we're going to be thinking about how we maximize these new remote tools in ways that complement our in-person successes. But whether we're engaging remotely or in person, the museum is going to continue to engage leaders who are so central to the health of our democracy.
Welcome to week 3 of Crisis Leadership and National Security.
Since the spring, we've run programs for international military officers, senior level government and military leaders, as well as police, prosecutors, lawyers, and judges.
It would be impossible not to bring it up, right? It is what is on everyone's mind right now.
We create meaningful remote educational experiences for our audiences, and it's only going to enhance our capacity to lead not only nationally, but also globally. We're constantly listening. We're constantly off kilter in the sense that we know the world is changing around us and we have to listen and we have to be ready to respond, but the challenge is great. The museum has met this moment, but our work isn't done.
History is a lesson and a warning. It can also be a source of hope. When people look back on the Holocaust, they often ask, what would I have done? Our job now is to get them to ask, what will I do? And we need your help.
The museum challenges us to consider our role individually and collectively in how we are shaping the future.
Anti-Semitism, hate, bigotry have no expiration date. And if we're not vigilant and not proactive, the past will become the future.
This has been a difficult year for all of us.
And if we didn't feel this was so important, we wouldn't be asking you to make a gift.
I hope from the bottom of my heart that you'll consider giving today.
Thank you so much for your generosity.
Your support allows the museum to engage new generations of young people and leaders who will take this history and its lessons forward. As Sarah just said, this history is a lesson and a warning. At the attack on the Capitol on January 6th, along with Holocaust survivors, we watched in horror as some members of the mob openly displayed neo-Nazi, anti-Semitic, and white supremacist symbols, several of which glorified the Holocaust. In this challenging and uncertain time for us as Americans, the museum's work educating people about how and why the Holocaust happened and the dangers of unchecked anti-Semitism and hate remain critically important. Joining us now are museum historian Edna Friedberg, speaking with Derek Black, a former white nationalist and the son of the founder of Stormfront, the first major far-right neo-Nazi online community. Derek publicly rejected the movement after a long period of questioning and relationship building. He now works to unravel the legacy of white supremacy and racist ideology. Welcome to you both.
Emmy, thank you so much. So Derek, I've had the pleasure of speaking with you before a couple of times, and you've shared with me your path to college, that you went there not seeking to expand your horizons per se, but to learn how to argue better, how to reinforce your positions as a white nationalist, and that you were slowly exposed to a wider range of people, to experiences, viewpoints, and began to establish trusting relationships that eventually led you to publicly renounce the ideology that you had been reared on. At its core, looking back, what do you think it really took, or what were the variables that helped you to change your worldview?
I had shown up to college thinking I was pretty cosmopolitan, thinking that I could be friends with anyone. Nothing should prevent me from having conversations with people, even if on a larger scale, race was so predictive of everything. And that eventually falls apart. Like, there is only so long that you can say, oh, I'm individually friends with people who my ideology says their family, their neighborhood, their community at large doesn't belong here in some way. It becomes kind of impossible.
So it took it outside of the realm of abstract ideas and humanized it. How did you cope? How did you move forward with that both intellectual journey, but as a individual?
It took years of being condemned on campus, of having quiet conversations with people, one by one, losing the evidence and losing what I believed, and taking that out piece by piece until I didn't have any foundation in white nationalism as something true or morally acceptable. But taking that final step of saying that I condemned this was the hardest thing, because it meant condemning my family. It meant condemning my friends. It meant condemning people who I deeply respected. It was just impossible to do anything else if the ideology that I was supporting, that I was promoting, was so harmful. Then the only ethical stance, once I saw that harm, was to speak out against it. But it was very difficult. It remains very difficult. Any fundamental belief that's really core to who we are is an extension of the people we care about. And I think if we think about it that way, as changing the connections that you have with people, and who is within the realm, the universal obligation of people who you care about and feel protective of, or at least expanding that, I think we should be able to recognize how difficult it is and why it's so rare that people do that.
I think that it's very easy for people on the outside to say, oh, white nationalism, it's just hateful, kind of to flatten it. but could you help us to understand more of the ideas at work in it? Specifically, since we are the Holocaust Museum, what role does anti-Semitism play in its belief system, in recruitment?
I think any chance to understand this ideology, you have to understand how central anti-Semitism is. White nationalists believe that the entire world should be segregated based on race, and just as much as they believe in this driving biological determinant factor in race, they also, at a fundamental level, believe that there is a global Jewish conspiracy and that Jewish people around the world are engaged in collective action to promote immigration into majority white countries, to lower the majority white population, to promote civil rights laws, to promote anti-racist egalitarian action because Jewish people hate white people. Like, this is a driving belief, and it is the driving belief of all the acts of mass violence that we see that comes out of this ideology against Jewish communities. When the synagogue in Pittsburgh was attacked, it was because of this white nationalist belief that Jewish people were promoting immigration, were promoting asylum of non-white people into America from this belief that they hated white people. And I think it's important to understand just how fundamentally they believe this.
I think we saw some of that centrality on pretty vivid display on January 6th with the rage and the violence at the US Capitol. Quite prominent were slogans and symbols drawn directly from Nazi ideology and the Holocaust. How do you explain that? Were you at all surprised? And how is this similar to or distinct, let's say, from the 2017 rally in Charlottesville?
I think January 6th definitely had major strains of explicit white nationalists. You could see it in the symbols, you could see it in the anti-Semitic signs and t-shirts and slogans, you could see it in the white supremacist slogans and signs that appeared there. I am always a little hesitant to talk completely about it because I think we're still sort of understanding everything else that was at the Capitol riots, that it was not just white nationalists in the way that Charlottesville was just white nationalists. A lot of the people who were at Charlottesville were present at the Capitol, but there was more. There was a broader array of right-wing ideologies, of militias, of patriot groups, of things that are adjacent to and maybe in a lot of ways mirror white nationalism, but that I'm not always comfortable saying are exactly the same thing as white nationalism. I'll say the same thing about movements like QAnon. They have a lot of overlap with white nationalist ideology, and a lot of the membership overlaps, but that they're not exactly the same thing. And I think it's still a lot of work going into figuring out how these different movements work together and cooperate. I think understanding the history of the white nationalist movement is going to be the most illuminating to understanding this current movement that attacked the Capitol on January 6th. And it took decades for groups that originally hated each other and were incredibly distrustful of each other to say, we have common ground, we're going to put aside our differences and try to join together into one movement. And I think maybe the internet makes that a little bit faster than it was in past decades, but I think a lot of the same processes are taking place now. There's another lesson here in white nationalism, that it exists over the long haul, that people are true believers, they build their lives around their worldview, and public backlash because of something like the Capitol or because of Charlottesville, or going back to lots of acts of mass violence or political embarrassments, they can be destabilized for a while. They can be less in the public for a while. But the reality is that they still exist. They are still trying to organize behind the scenes, and that after a few years, they return. After Charlottesville, there was a massive national backlash against white nationalist organizations. Most of the organizations that marched at Charlottesville fell apart afterwards because of that backlash. And yet, several years later at the Capitol, a lot of the people who were at Charlottesville showed up again. And what that should teach us is that we just weren't paying attention, not that they went away or were defeated or something.
the moment can feel more or less welcoming, conducive, emboldening, if I'm hearing you right.
In moments where there's a lot of backlash, like right now, I think it's very reasonable to expect that they will not be so public, that they will not organize as effectively, but that it won't always be like this. The history of the last 4 or 5 decades is that we have moments where our society is really focused on the threat that these movements pose, and then we have moments where we're much less focused. And those are the times where it's much more conducive to appear again.
As a closing question, I just hoping you could reflect a little bit about what an institution like ours, like the Holocaust Museum, means to you, why you've chosen to partner with us, and why you think this history is significant for young people in the United States to learn about today.
It's been one of the most fruitful relationships that I've had. I really respect the entire history of the Holocaust Memorial Museum's outreach, their focus on education, and their focus on our individual roles. That it's not just that we should study the past in order to see how awful things have been at different times. The lesson that the museum instills in every program that I've ever participated in or seen them put on has been that we play individual roles, and that society's future is always decided by the individual roles that we all function, that we're all important, that individual people's decisions are probably the most important thing, even though we always feel like maybe what we do is insignificant. Our individual choices do make the future, and working with the museum is one of the spaces where I think that is made most explicit to future generations.
Well, I want to thank you. I want to commend you on your journey, on your willingness and openness to share it with us, to be our partner. And we appreciate the opportunity to have that conversation with you today, get a little glimpse. So.
Thanks, Edna.
Derek, I understand that you are the young man who's going on with all the ideas and hopes that I have. I hope you live to 110, that you have time to do everything that you dream about. And you certainly have my blessing and my gratitude and my love.
Gerda, I really appreciate your words. It's not always the case that I feel incredibly confident about what is the right thing to be doing, where is the right place to be speaking. And hearing your words and coming from someone who has done so much good, it's very encouraging. Thank you.
The Holocaust Museum is so important to our family. I remember so well when it was being built and our mother felt that her story was being validated for the very first time. Having grown up in the shadow of the Holocaust, it's something that I feel very deeply in my bones, and that I feel a tremendous responsibility to pass on.
Our first grandchild was born a couple of months before our mother passed away. When she held our grandson, she said, "I waited for you. I didn't know if I would make it, but I'm so glad to meet you."
It's a legacy of l'Ador Vador, the passing of history, tradition, perspective from generation to generation.
Tonight, 3 generations of our family are committing to you that we will never forget.
To our parents, Gerda, and all of the survivors,
we will remember.
We will remember. We pledge to keep your stories alive.
We pledge to never forget.
We will remember.
Please say it again.
We will remember.